So, we've finally come to the third and final review for the Doctor Who 60th Anniversary specials. After reviewing both the Star Beast and Wild Blue Yonder, we've arrived at the third and final episode titled The Giggle. But is this just as good as the other two episodes, or is it even better? And more importantly, does this episode give us a fresh take on one of Who's most obscure villains from the 60s? Well, sit back, get a drink and some popcorn, because you're about to find out. Now, when it came to the last of these three episodes, I, like a lot of people, was very excited to see how RTD would not only do justice to a villain as obscure as the Toymaker, but also how he was going to handle the regeneration of David Tennant into Ncuti Gatwa. And I'm happy to say that The Giggle might very well be my favourite episode out of these three specials. Not only is the story very entertaining, but the cast puts in a brilliant performance, and the villain I'll get to in a moment. So the cast for this episode in particular, despite a few returning faces, might be my favourite out of all the specials. I think this is definitely one of David Tennant's best episodes of the 14th Doctor because he's able to match wits with the Toymaker very well. Catherine Tate especially is very good as Donna, and I love that this resolves the money problems with her family now that she's kind of got a job with UNIT, I guess. And speaking of UNIT, it was great to see Gemma Redgrave return as Kate Stewart. It's always a pleasure to see her on screen. Ruth Madeley is once again great as Shirley Bingham for the time she's there, and I really loved seeing Melanie Bush in this episode. As someone who isn't too immersed in classic Who, it's pretty cool to see Mel there. Also, Bonnie Langford as well was outstanding in the episode. Now, I'll get to Ncuti Gatwa's performance a bit later on, as I have a lot of in-depth thoughts about what the future holds for him. And now we come to arguably the most intriguing villain return in Doctor Who, the Celestial Toymaker, now played by Neil Patrick Harris. Now, as I said before, I don't know a lot about classic Who, but based on what I do know, the Toymaker definitely seemed like an interesting foe to bring into the new era, and I absolutely loved how he was utilised here. Seeing the Toymaker in the special was brilliant, and I seriously loved how much charisma and charm that Neil Patrick Harris himself brought to the role. RTD could have quite easily cast him as the Master, but given his deep love for the show, Russell went the extra mile and decided to bring back the Toymaker, which was an absolutely brilliant choice. On another note, the Toymaker as a villain I thought was very complex and matches up well to the Doctor. Whilst Michael Gough's Toymaker matched well with William Hartnell's first Doctor back in the 60s, I think that Harris is a brilliant match for Tennant in a very similar circumstance to when the Master returned in 2007, when John Sim was cast as a new incarnation, who would match well to Tennant as the 10th Doctor. That's what I loved about the Toymaker as a character, as while Harris's performance seems very uncanny to the Master, I think casting him as the Toymaker was a better move, and I couldn't really see it in any other way. So when talking about the story of the episode, there's a lot to unpack here, because the Toymaker's plans are traced back to the first television broadcast ever, which I thought was cool and reminds me of how the 11th Doctor used TV footage of the moon landing to trick the silence. To me, it's almost like role reversal, and makes me think that perhaps the Toymaker watched the Doctor's adventures after his defeat, and saw everything he did, including the Time War and the companions he lost after. I thought it was cool to see all these callbacks to other companions too, with Amy, Bill and Clara as well. Whilst it would have been brilliant to see them back in the flesh, I think seeing these former companions work as puppets is more in line for a character like the Toymaker. Another thing I loved was how at the end of the episode we get what's almost like a reboot in a sense, with 14 still existing and then 15 going off in the TARDIS to continue the story. Whilst I'm sure we'll get a deeper explanation for this later on, I think we're going to see 14 return one day to perhaps tie off this story eventually, and I'll discuss that in a future video. Okay, so now we come to what is the most important part of these specials, the first appearance of Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, and the regeneration, or more appropriately, bi-generation. I'm still trying to piece together what the implications of this are, but I'll save that for another time, because this isn't really the place. But in all seriousness, I already love Ncuti as the Doctor, and his few scenes in this episode are enough to convince me that he's going to be absolutely brilliant in the role. Still a little mixed on bi-generation itself, but I'll explain that in another video, because believe me, that's a headache of its own. Now, when talking about setups for the future, the third and final episode of the special sets up quite a lot. We do of course have the upcoming Xmas special and Series 14 on the way, but there's a lot more than you'd actually think. We have the possible return of the Noble family in 14 of course, seeing as 14 also has his own TARDIS now and could quite easily go off on his own adventures with Donna and possibly Rose too, depending on if Yasmin Finney returns for future stories in the new universe. Also, with how Unit was left off, I could easily see a Unit show happening in the future, and we of course have the inevitable return of the Master, as it was mentioned by the toy maker that he previously played a game with the Master who then lost and was shrunken into a golden tooth, which we then see picked up by an ominous hand. Is it the Rani? Is it Jinx Monsoon? We'll never know, at least for now, and I expect we're going to get a definitive answer in either Series 14 or a future Christmas special. But in conclusion, I think The Giggle is a fantastic episode. Not only do we see David Tennant at his best, but we get a taste of what's to come for Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, and I'm seriously excited to see what comes next for the Whoniverse. And that concludes my review of The Giggle, and by extension my complete trilogy of reviews for the 60th anniversary specials. Be sure to stay tuned for more videos where I go into Bi-Generation, how RTD is setting up an MCU-style shared universe, and looking at more of what comes after. In the meantime, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for further videos, and be sure to stick around for future videos like this one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all soon.